Hi again, everybody. Welcome to the Bricks and Bleachers podcast. All things Chicago Cubs in under 10 minutes. Cubs with an early, disappointing end to the 2018 campaign. We'll take a brief recap of that disappointing exit, plus take a look ahead at 2019 and revisit preseason predictions. You know, everyone makes them in February and March. Then they're forgotten by mid-May and never heard from again. In our last episode, Cubs and Brewers were tied heading into the final day of the regular season. A number of scenarios were possible. We talked about them. And the one I said was a worst-case scenario is what played out for the Chicago Cubs. Both teams ended up winning, and winning big on that Sunday, forcing a tiebreaker at Wrigley Field the following day. Cubs dropped that one, forcing them into Tuesday's wild card game with Colorado. Cubs lost both games, scoring just one run in each contest. And that's a pretty accurate summary of how the season unraveled. The second half of the season especially. You know most of this already. Cubs ended up with one run or fewer 39 times. That's just shy of one out of every four games, putting up 0 or 1 run, and that's it. And that's not counting the wild card game. Only the O's had more games of one run or fewer, and they did that 40 times. And that was a team that won only like 40-some games. I think 46 or 47 was the O's final tally. So not good company for our Cubs. Cubs did end up leading the National League in batting average, yet they were dead last in high leverage situations. At the top of many offensive categories in the first half of the season, but the second half, it all unraveled, and Chili Davis has ended up paying the price. He has been let go by the club last week. No word on other coaching changes, but Jim Hickey deserves a lot of credit with the pitching staff. Chris Bosio performed well in his tenure with the Cubs. And Hickey came in for the 2018 campaign with a solid resume and delivered a pretty solid season. He's a longtime friend of Joe Maddon, and that chemistry paid off not only with the manager, but with the players as well. It's going to be interesting to see who the Cubs bring in as hitting coach. Free agency begins right after the World Series. Of course, you like to see your team strengthen the bullpen. I think that's a high priority for every team. They were solid last season, the Cubs bullpen was, despite Brandon Morrow's lengthy absence, and then missing Pedro Strop for much of September. So guessing an infielder will also be on the team's wish list. Addison Russell has been suspended by Major League Baseball following domestic abuse allegations from his ex-wife. It's a 40-game suspension, retroactive to September 21st. Russell says he will not challenge it. No appeal is expected, so there will be no Addison Russell through April and into early May. And I'm guessing he's played his last game as a Chicago Cub. Despite low trade value, I think they will be moving him. I think the Cubs end up keeping Cole Hamels. He was spectacular in his time with the Cubs. And I say they also retain Jesse Chavez as well. Other free agents on the Cubs roster include Daniel Murphy, Justin Wilson, Bobby Wilson, and Jorge De La Rosa. I'd like to see Murphy return. I don't know if that will happen, especially from a budget standpoint. But if they do re-sign him, then I retract the statement I made a few moments ago of needing another infielder. Murphy would do the trick, and there would be no remaining spots left to fill. I think you'd have Bryant at third. You'd move Baez to short in place of Russell. Murphy would be the everyday second baseman, Rizzo at first. Russell would either come in off the bench or, as I mentioned previously, he will be gone and out of the picture for the Cubs. Case for Murphy is that he's a solid hitter. He'll hit 300. He'll be a reliable leadoff guy. Really, other than Dexter Fowler in 2016, Cubs have not had a consistent or reliable leadoff hitter in the last several years. Even though the Cubs' depth is among the best in baseball, I say they give up some of that depth to add pieces this offseason. I think Schwarber, Happ, Almora, maybe a combination of a couple of those guys will be used to secure a big bullpen arm or an everyday position player. Theo said shortly after the season that several players had expressed to him concern about the variable lineups put forth by Joe Maddon day in, day out. You really weren't sure who was going to be playing where and in what spot of the order they would be in either. So if that's the case, where you're looking for more consistency, I say you have Daniel Murphy there every day as a leadoff guy and every day at second base. I think you need a solid outfielder too. Schwarber, Happ, Almora. maybe even Zobrist and Hayward all saw some time in the outfield in platoon situations based on the opposing pitcher. I think Hayward gets more everyday play out of that bunch, putting him in right, and you saw him in center towards the end of this past season. Plus, you'll get one more everyday outfielder. So I think 2 of those 3 spots will be an everyday outfielder, leaving Madden with 1 outfield spot to rotate with those young guys. Again, if you move a couple of those in exchange for 1 everyday guy, it's not really that much of a puzzle to accommodate all those pieces needing to be worked in. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, let's take a look at the preseason predictions. Like I said earlier, everyone makes them, then they never get revisited. I said back before the season began, you could count on the Cubs for 96 wins. They ended up with 95. I expected an improved batting average from last year, improved offensive showing with Chili Davis, and that was the case, at least in terms of overall batting average. They delivered the best average in the National League, but that was deceiving with the struggles offensively in the second half. And again, the high leverage situation average, it's like 226 or something close to it, and that was worst in the National League. I said Jose Quintana would be a Cy Young candidate with 18 wins. Turned out John Lester was the guy delivering that. He turned in 18 wins. He was a Cy Young candidate for a while. I had Yu Darvish and Kyle Hendricks with 16 wins apiece, 14 from Lester and 12 from Chatwood. Hendricks ended up with 14, followed by Quintana at 13. A couple other interesting notes. You have Cole Hamels ending up with as many wins as a Cub as Tyler Chatwood. Each had 4. Pedro Strop bested them both with 6. Now, I said 6 guys would end up hitting 20 home runs. That was something that happened in 2017. I figured that would be the case, and probably pretty easily would be the case in 2018. Wasn't even close on that one. I expected improvements from Bryant, Russell, and Hayward, and only Hayward delivered on that prediction. I said Ian Happ would be a breakout star. Not so much. Started off the year pretty strong, especially with that home run on the first pitch of the season in Miami. But overall, way too many strikeouts for Ian Happ. But you think back to the early days of Javi Baez, he was pretty similar. So exciting at times, but also still is very ineffective with all the strikeouts. Was excited by what we saw from David Bodie. I don't think anyone expected much production from him coming into the season, since he was expected to be a guy at Iowa, AAA Iowa. So he was a nice surprise for the Chicago Cubs. Now, I also made some preseason predictions about the rest of the National League Central. I called for the Cards to stumble early and then get hot, possibly making the playoffs. And that's pretty close to what happened. They did not make the playoffs, but they did stumble out of the gate. They made the managerial change, got hot for a while, and was a playoff contender there for a good while. I said coming into the season, Milwaukee was a team to be concerned about, and that was the case. I said they would probably build upon their 80-some win season in 2017, especially if pitching would hold up. And that was the case. In fact, they made a couple acquisitions late in the season to bolster their pitching staff, and here they are still playing against the Dodgers in the National League Championship Series. Would love to get your thoughts. Maybe if you made some preseason picks, tell me how those turned out. Tell me what you think about 2018 and what the Cubs should do heading into 2019, especially with the off-season free agency period just a couple of weeks away. Bricks Bleachers on Facebook or Twitter. Love for you to connect with us. Leave your comments. We'll try to work them into the show. Be sure to subscribe as well on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is the Bricks and Bleachers podcast.